Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
We are a couple of journalists covering cars for the better part of 2 decades, and we're going to go over some of the most interesting things we've been driving lately today, as well as a really cool rivalry developing, an interesting rivalry, maybe a little bit of an ugly rivalry developing in the auction business. First off, Hannah, you finally got to drive, I guess it's only been out for a few months now, but the Cybertruck, right?
Yes, this was a big goal of ours, and we did it. Thanks to Turo. We rented it on Turo.
Nice. Oh, so, cool. Yeah. I didn't even know that. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of an EV extravaganza at first, because I drove the Kia EV9. And I think it's fair to say a lot of people have been excited about that, so we'll talk about that. But the EV landscape is just looking worse and worse and worse every day, at least from the manufacturer's perspective. Then we're going to talk about a hypercar. Is it fair to call the McLaren a hypercar? Or is this just a supercar?
I would call this a supercar. I would call this the McLaren 750S.
All right, so you spent some seat time in that, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm interested to learn what the color is called, because I couldn't tell if it was gray or blue, but I love it.
Or periwinkle.
There you go. So we'll talk about that. And then this rivalry, you've written a story for Bloomberg Pursuits about a rivalry in the collector car, like the high-end auction market, right? And yes. Amelia Island is one of those that I always think about as the top events.
Definitely.
So we'll get into all of that stuff. I do want to point out that we have been talking about the emails listeners are sending in. And we read all of these emails and respond to all of them as well. So we're really happy to get more suggestions from you, questions from you. The email address is?
The email address is hotpursuit@bloomberg.net.
Yeah, definitely write in, because I also get a lot of intel from these. Like, it's helped me a lot in my search for a car, which is being delivered as we speak. Plus, I'm really looking deeper and deeper into the sort of disappointment of EVs, and somebody recommended a Harry Metcalf piece that I watched, which I got a lot of interesting stuff from. Please shoot us an email, hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. Let's kick it off, though, with the Cybertruck. I saw, I think, a video or a reel, they're called on Instagram now, of you trying to park it somewhere.
Yes.
Successfully. Not like it was too hard, but...
No, I have to say the goal with this loan was just to see how it behaves in normal daily environments. I didn't want to take it, off on some grand off-roading tour. I wanted to just drive it around town and see how it was. And
well, tell us first how you got it. Is it brand new? How many miles are on it? Who rented it to you? What's the deal?
James V rented it to me on Turo. This is actually any of you listening can do this. There's a link that will be in my coverage, which goes live on Tuesday. And I rented it literally off of Turo. James V is the guy who owns it. He had put down a deposit on the truck literally during the presentation in 2019. So he has been waiting a long time. And this was the all-wheel drive version, not the Cyber Beast version, which is not yet out yet. But this version, he said I was his first rental. So no pressure. I really didn't want to get anything, scratched.
How new? How many miles did he have it on already?
You know what? That's a good question. I don't know.
All right, but the all-wheel drive version, is that the top of the line that you can get right now?
Currently, yes. That is sort of the foundational version that you can get. It still promises 320 miles of range. I think that was probably closer in real world driving to maybe 250. And it's a little bit slower than the Cyber Beast. It goes 0 to 60 in about 4 seconds.
Which is still fast.
It's still lightning fast. And the great thing about this rental was James actually delivered the truck to me at 10 a.m. on a Friday morning and then picked it up at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. The rental cost a little over $1,000. So for anybody wanting, yes. And you know what? James, the owner, was a really nice guy. He said he had a new upcoming rental. Someone rented it for 10 days for $14,000.
What?
So it's really popular. Yeah, it's crazy. But
guy's gonna make a profit.
he's going to make a profit. Obviously, he doesn't get all that money, but yeah, he said once he gets 10 rentals under his belt, he can up the rates for renting it. So he's and another thing, he's got 2 more Cybertrucks on order. So this is going to be
it's
quite
a business for this guy.
Yeah.
It's a profit deal.
Yeah.
I see.
So really fascinating. And a lot of people, when I was driving the truck, asked, how did you get this? Where did you get it? And yeah, it's just Turo. So thanks, Turo. Good job on that. To answer your question about the reel, Matt, that reel was actually that valet at Chateau Marmont parking the car, because one of the things we wanted to do for the test is, hey, throw the keys to the valet and see how they react just jumping in with no exposure at all and trying to park the thing. And I have to give big credit to Ray at the Chateau. He's actually worked as the valet there since 1986. So he's seen
My goodness.
Everything. And he did not bat an eye. And the turning radius, as we found out in that reel, on the Cybertruck is great. It has some of that rear wheel steering that really helps maneuver it into tight spots. So yeah, that's the reel that you were talking about.
So
Matt.
how big is it? I mean, like, I'm used to, I guess, F-150 sized trucks are the norm, and obviously they're much bigger now than they were in 1986. Is the Cybertruck around that size? Is it bigger, smaller? What's the deal?
It's around that size. To me, it feels wider inside, but I actually think that's because it's more spacious inside. I would say outside dimensions are roughly that of like an F-250. It's big, but it's not as big as like, for instance, the electric Hummer. We've got a Chevy van that we drive around to flea market and stuff. It's not as big as a Chevy van.
Really?
Cargo van. Yeah. So it's big, but it doesn't feel unusable. And I have to say, I found that the visibility was decent. The maneuverability of it, especially thanks again to that steering apparatus, was really quite surprising.
Is that optional or is it standard all-wheel steering?
I believe it's standard. Yeah,
Wow.
and on this variant, which is sort of their all-wheel drive variant, yeah.
So it sounds like you didn't hate driving it.
Yeah. So I have to say, of course, I was really curious going in. I'm not personally, I would not buy one. I don't think, because it's not my aesthetic, and it's not my aesthetic, but it is a lot of people's aesthetic. And I have never in my 20 years of reviewing cars had as much excitement, all of it positive, as I have had with people reacting to the Cybertruck. I mean, I was a little bit worried at some points because people were running out into the street to take photos of it, and it all was very positive, and people were smiling and happy, and honestly, that's very nice to see. It's just nice to be in something that causes some sort of emotional reaction.
A positive one, especially.
Exactly. There's so much ubiquitous appliance-like stuff on the road, and honestly, it's just nice that, okay, this is different. This causes a reaction.
I wonder if that's partly because you're in LA. You're in the land of Teslas,
certainly.
right? Because in other places where it snowed, for instance, somebody got a Tesla stuck in the snow, which obviously has nothing to do with the Cybertruck. It's all about the tires.
Yeah.
But like 16 people were taking videos of it, and they put it
laughing.
on, Instagram Reels, and they were kind of making fun of it in the sense that, oh, this Cybertruck can't even get up a hill in the snow, which is stupid. But I imagine in California you're going to have a much more positive reaction.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say the hate is definitely real online. When I posted that reel on my Instagram account, Hannah Elliott XO, it got plenty of hate. I mean, people don't like it, and obviously that's fair. I personally probably wouldn't buy one myself. But in the real world, in Los Angeles, people love it. I mean, they wanted to talk about it, like, from all walks of life, all ages, all demographics. It was a very nice thing to see, I would say. And to that point, I would also say, if you're not feeling especially friendly or chatty, don't drive the Cybertruck that day, because people are going to want to talk to you about it.
I think it looks cool and looks like a stainless steel kind of a DeLorean truck. if you will. And I've always liked just that finish on metal. What about the functionality? Like, did you? I'm surprised that the visibility was decent because it looks like it would have difficult visibility. So how was getting in and out of it, putting stuff in it, like other people? Like, how did it work?
That's a great question. I have to say the visibility issue is overcome in large part by cameras. So if you're somebody who doesn't like cameras, you won't like it. For instance, when the rear is shut, there's like a roller top that shuts over the rear part of the pickup bed that locks it in. When that's shut, you can't see behind you. You have to rely on a camera. You can't use the rear view mirror to look behind you. It's blocked. But in terms of getting in and out, it's not so tall that it's awkward. I've been in vehicles, even some, like the Mercedes G-Wagon 4x4 squared. That is really a huge step up to get in, even for me, and I'm tall. The Cybertruck wasn't like that. It does feel carefully thought out, I would say. Again, I'm surprised to tell you this, but that's the truth.
That's awesome. I'm glad.
Point, to your point, though, I think a big question is how is it going to wear over the long term? And you brought up the stainless steel body. I mean, that is a magnet for smudges and fingerprints and every little thing. James, the guy who rented it to me, was doing the lick your thumb and try to wipe off smudges, and it just made it completely worse. So there's smudges all over the thing. I've read threads online about how it's corroding, don't leave it in the rain because it's somehow degrading the stainless steel, which seems like an oxymoron. But so, there is some question about how does this wear long term.
The point of stainless steel is that it shouldn't corrode.
Yes. Take that with a grain of salt, I guess. Certainly the interior of this particular truck did seem to wear pretty well. I actually had the dog in it.
What is it? Is it smooth leather? Is it suede? Is it?
It's smooth leather.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was, for 24 hours, it was resistant to the dog being in there. I took it to Home Depot, that sort of thing. So, my rationale is, hey, this is a truck. It's being sold as a adventure performance rig. So what do you do with the truck? You put a dog in it and you go to Home Depot.
Yeah. So in terms of the Cybertruck, are we going to start? I know James is getting two more, but are we going to start seeing when's the Beast come out?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Are we going to start seeing more of them produced, or is it like a loss leader and so they're not making as many as they can, or what's the story? That's
a good question, and Tesla has been really quiet on saying how many they've made and delivered and how many they can make. I hesitate to even quote any estimates that Elon has said over the years because it always changes. When they first announced this truck, they said, it would be about half the price that it is now. So it's a bit of a moving target, but we don't know. I think, look, you can, I'm looking at the website right now. You can place your order. James doesn't know quite when he's going to get his next two. It's a big question mark. So,
right.
That's another negative about it. It's really tough to know anything super specific.
Well, they're not alone in that, right? Because it seems like everything's late these days. Even gas trucks, like the Ford Ranger, is late. And pricing on stuff is much higher than it was supposed to be. I think I was hearing a story about the Equinox was supposed to be about 30, and actually it's going to be more than 40. So that's just everything is so expensive.
Yeah.
Like the EV9 I drove, my wife was really into it and approving of it, and she said, "Hey, how much is this compared to the Mercedes GLS that we just bought?" And I said, "Well, it's much more." Like we drove the GT line, which is over $75,000.
Yeah.
Granted, it's a 3-row SUV, and I thought it was a great vehicle, but that's a pretty steep price tag, right, for a Kia?
Absolutely. I mean, my question now to you is, did you feel like you were in a luxury vehicle, even though Kia is not a luxury brand?
I really did in some sense. In the sense of functionality, it is luxurious. It does everything that a luxury vehicle does. For example, it's got massaging seats that are wonderful. And even the second row has electric motors that move the seats around. So it performs like a luxury vehicle, but it doesn't have the fit and finish necessarily of a luxury vehicle. It's not caked in leather like a Mercedes would be. When I got in the Mercedes EQS, it was like there's leather as far as the eye can see, and gorgeous leather at that. That's not the case in the Kia, but you don't really need it. Let me just tell you, I really appreciated the vehicle in terms of the functionality of it, in terms of the space, the layout, the steering wheel, which some people have criticized for being squared off and ugly. I thought was fantastic and worked really well. The modes button in the EV9 is right by your thumb. On the first press, it goes into sport. And that's what you want to be in. The sport button automatically tightens up the seat bolsters, so the seat hugs you, and then you're ready to go. It's obviously quick because it's an EV. So every time I got in, I would push the sport button right away. The storage is amazing. The infotainment system worked flawlessly and is intuitive.
How's the sound?
The sound it's okay. It's not upgraded. It's not an extra cost. It's a pretty decent sound system. Listened to a lot of Grateful Dead with my daughter last week. And it's got a lot of space, right? Now, the seats are oddly shaped, which they kind of jut out in the back. So when you're trying to fit a rear-facing car seat, you do have to move the front seats forward a little bit to get it in there, at least the ones that I have. But there's still ample room for someone who's at least up to my height, so up to 6'3". The vehicle, I think, has so much going for it. I would call it a home run for a 3-row EV, if that's what you want. For me, EV really not going to cut it right now, and I think for a lot of people, which is why you're seeing the slowdown in growth, and especially I have great concerns about Kia. I was talking about the Harry Metcalf piece. He's a automotive journalist in the UK, and he has a YouTube series, and one of our listeners emailed and said, check out his piece on EVs. And he references the battery deterioration that these cars experience. And Kias and Hyundais, now maybe these are the older generation of vehicles because, they're over 3, 4, 5 years, but their batteries degraded quickly. I mean, 20, 30, 50% degradation in terms of range. Now, all of that depends on the climate that you're in and the way you charge it and the way you use it. But,
it's a valid concern.
It's a huge concern.
Yeah.
If you bought a car that had, 300 miles of range, an ICE car, and then after 5 years, it only could go 150 miles on a full tank, that would be a real problem.
I mean, it's just like a cell phone, to be honest. I mean, my cell phone is like, 2/3 of the capacity that it used to have, battery-wise.
Well, and I wonder also about the difficulty. First of all, the expense of the battery I know is huge. So if you're going to switch out the battery, it's very expensive to get the replacement battery to begin with. But how difficult is it to pull a battery out of an EV and put a new battery in?
I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I'm really curious, back to the competitor thing with Kia. I know that Rivian, they would like to say that, well, maybe Kia would like to say that the EV9 could compete against the Rivian
for sure.
SUV.
I mean, for sure. The only thing the Rivian has over the EV9 is the amazing power, right? Because if you get the quad motor, I think it's like 850 horsepower in the Rivian. The Kia doesn't reach that high. This is a vehicle I could easily see people cross-shopping with the Rivian and then walking away saying, you know what? The Rivian is just a little bit too expensive.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned you're worried about the company. On the same token, by the same token, though, Rivian has laid off 10% of their salaried workers recently. We just saw that news, and
and they're only going to produce like 50 or 60,000 vehicles this year, which is just what they produced last year. I mean, so it's a real disappointment.
Right. In a way, it's like, well, if you are in the market for this size electric SUV, I would almost go with the established automaker that has been around for many decades, versus the startup.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for an EV for the family, leaving aside the 3-row issue, I mean, to me, the 3-row thing, I'd rather have a 2-row. I need a lot of space in the second row for my kids, but the likelihood of me actually putting somebody in the third row is very low. It's just not a great place to sit, to get into, to get out of, to be in. So I think the only real competitor to the EV9 is the BMW iX, because that's the only other EV SUV for families, family-oriented vehicle that's been really well executed. I mean, you could argue the Mercedes EQS, but that's another level higher in terms of luxury.
That is for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. But my question is, for the people the families who really do need a third row, they're not gonna. The iX won't cut it for them.
No, this is your only
it just
choice.
Won't.
This is your only. If you really need a third row, this is your only choice. But if you're looking for just a generic family SUV and you're willing to shell out $80,000, it's a little more for the iX, I think.
Until we get the electric Escalade.
In any case, I was definitely impressed, and I think just Kia, Hyundai, Genesis, they're killing it.
Yeah, I know.
Killing it. And I know that EV growth is slower than expected, and there's so many disappointments. But if this company continues, to build throughout, obviously it's going to come back. At some point they're going to solve the infrastructure problem. At some point they're going to solve the affordability problem. And Kia and Hyundai and Genesis will have made a huge name for themselves already.
Do you think electric vehicles are inevitable?
Yes.
It's just a question of when.
Yes. I mean,
I don't think they are necessarily.
A lot of people will question manufacturers' lineup. Why are they still putting out so many EVs? Haven't we all pivoted to hybrids? Mm-hmm. But these things were planned 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There's nothing else for them to do.
Right.
They can't pivot on a dime. These are giant tankers,
I actually, it's interesting. I was just at the track with McLaren, and I did ask them, how quickly can you guys pivot? Because, they're working on hybrid stuff, and that's the question I'm asking everyone these days. How much leeway do you have? How quickly can you pivot? How much are you hedging still? And
it's
I think it's different for every automaker.
Yeah, definitely easier. I would guess that it's easier for McLaren than it is for General Motors, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Different beast entirely. That's a great segue into your drive. So, on the one hand, I feel like any McLaren that you drive is going to be amazing. Mm-hmm. It's hard to disappoint with a $300,000 car.
Right.
I don't know. Tell me the details. How much was this one?
So this is the 750S. I actually had the Spider version. This is basically the continuation of the 720S. So it looks, for all intents and purposes, it looks just like a 720. There are some cosmetic changes.
They all look the same to me, I will say.
That's a big problem with McLaren. Even for me, it's tough to tell them apart. And it's tough to know, the 675 LT does this. And then, there are a few that we obviously know, like the Artura, great car, GTS, great. Okay, we look at those and we know some of the variants and some in the supercar / GTS / Ultimate. It gets a little confusing. Anyway, 750S, this is their 720S successor. The Spider starts at about $353,000. They really wanted to emphasize that, yes, the performance numbers are slightly improved over the 720, but they really were focusing on enhancing driving engagement and making it feel more exciting to drive, not just faster.
Which is important. In an age of electric cars, I think it doesn't matter as much. Obviously, you don't want to be doing 0 to 60 in 9.3 seconds.
Correct.
But rather 3.9 seconds. But now they all do that, right?
Yeah.
I recently saw, as an aside, an old Volvo ad where they were bragging that their turbo, I think it was a 760 or whatever, did 0 to 60 in 9.3 seconds.
Nice.
That was a bonus.
That was the brag?
Back then, yeah.
I like those old ads.
But
they still make me laugh.
But so they want to improve the driving experience. Still, I imagine it's not available with the manual transmission.
No, it's not. I mean, they're big. They really emphasize this is lighter. It's more lightweight, and it's got like 30 more horsepower and marginally more torque. But it's light. It's a lighter car. They're saving weight in the seats. They're saving weight with the wheels. They're saving weight with some of the rear aerodynamic configuration. So Yeah, it's engaging. I have to say, we drove through Valley of Fire outside Las Vegas, and then we drove it on the track, but it was raining. So the track portion was cut short for safety considerations, and probably not as aggressive as it would have been if it was a dry track. But obviously, really fun car. They've changed the HDMI on the inside, and they haven't quite worked out all of the quirks with the central computer apparatus. And this has been a problem with McLaren that they've had since day one, and I don't think they've ironed it out yet. For instance, the Bluetooth for a while didn't connect and then just dropped when I tried to use it on the drive. So that there was something not quite right there. And at one point, the center console screen just went black and then like rebooted, and it had the navigation had frozen a little bit. So,
but was it a production model that you were driving?
As far as I know, I guess I'd have to ask them specifically, but I was never told it's a prototype or a pre-production.
I can't believe that people still have problems, manufacturers still have problems with this stuff. Even GM has had real problems with that.
Yeah.
In the Blazer, at least.
It's certainly not only McLaren, obviously. You're right. GM has had problems with that. And I remember, speaking of Cadillac, when I drove the Lyriq, there were some weird quirks in their entertainment system as well. So I think, obviously, it's really hard. It's really hard to get right. Interesting.
So
yeah.
I'm looking at the McLaren website, and I don't foresee myself ever driving a McLaren. I don't even know how you get a hold of one of those.
Have you driven one ever?
No.
You know, they're on paper, they're really perfect. They're kind of a perfect driving car, and they're so track oriented, which I think is why McLaren sort of gets away with having less than luxury interiors sometimes, because they say, well, we're track focused, we're track cars, we're not trying to be a luxury car. But I do think for the price of $350,000, you should feel special.
For $350,000, it better have doors that open like this.
Right. Well,
does it have doors that open like this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For everyone listening, he's raising his arms like a
they
seagull.
know.
Yeah.
They've seen Silicon Valley.
Yeah. The thing with McLaren, though, just on a final note, is, sometimes it's hard for me to connect on an emotional level, even though they're really beautifully driving track cars.
They seem clinical.
They're extremely clinical, and a lot of people like that. They're very, very clinical, but, some people don't.
Yeah, it wouldn't be for me. Like, if I had $350,000 and I had to spend it on a car, it definitely wouldn't be a McLaren. No offense to people who do like them.
There are a lot of people who do.
And maybe I also live in the wrong place. I'm in the wrong stage in my life. It just wouldn't make any sense. But they're nice to look at and see occasionally. You don't really see them very often, which is a huge bonus, right? Compared to, I feel like I see more Ferraris and Lamborghinis by a long shot around here than I do McLarens.
Definitely. And that is something we talked about on this launch, that some of the really high-end Porsches are sort of approaching sort of a base McLaren price point. And if you're going to spend, call it like $250,000, and you can buy one a McLaren or a Porsche, the McLaren's going to look like a supercar. The Porsche, unless you really know what you're looking at, is going to look like a sports car.
True, but I'd rather have the Porsche than the McLaren and save the money for gas.
There you go.
Well, I mean, what would you take? An ST or a 750S?
Well,
911 ST or 750S?
It's been noted on the record that I really love the ST. I really like that car, so I would take the ST.
So let me ask you this. If it wasn't about the money, but I say, listen, I'm going to give you one of these cars, and it's not for resale, would you rather have a 911 Turbo or a McLaren 750S?
Oh, 992 Turbo. And again, this
for
is
half the price.
It's way more functional on every level. And I think when that came out, was it 2 years ago? That was my favorite car I drove all year. It's a Swiss Army knife. It just does everything really well. And it has the X factor of engaging. It really engages you. You feel excited to drive it. I actually like that it's a little bit, it can blend in. I don't really want something that screams, look at me all the time. In fact, most of the time I don't. So I like that. But, some people do want something that looks really unusual and
right, and that's what
exotic, and so that's why you get the McLaren.
They're serving that niche, and I mean,
Absolutely.
if you have a McLaren, you probably are adding the 10th or 11th car to your collection.
Absolutely.
But the bottom line is, for most people, for you and me, if money wasn't an issue, we would take a Carrera T over a 750S, right?
It's more drivable on a daily basis, yeah. And I have to say, in the 750S too, I noticed a lot of the other guys this was a group press drive, they were struggling to get in and out of it, moving the seat back, sort of ducking underneath the wing door opening up. It's a little awkward. It's low. You got to move the steering wheel. And, if you've got any sort of girth to you, I noticed some struggling. So it just was it's just not as, you don't flow into it like you might in other cars.
On Bring a Trailer, there was a GT40 replica that sold for like $350,000, and I was thinking that looks so cool, but I noticed it has the removable steering wheel.
Yeah, you know what that means.
That means it's impossible to get in and out of.
Yeah, bang your knees.
That's the kind of thing you could buy at Amelia Island.
Yes.
And to me,
the original ones.
As someone who knows very little about the collector car world and the auctions, I put Amelia Island up there with the best of the best in terms of the auctions. But I have heard a lot from collector people, not just from you but others, who say there's a rumble brewing in terms of the auctions. There's a rumble
in the jungle.
So what's happening down there in Florida?
It's really interesting because this is such an obscure world, but the personalities involved and the stakes involved with how much money is to be made are big. And so you're right, Amelia Island is one of the few sort of recognized jewel-level concours that happen. Pebble Beach, Villa d'Este might be another one that you've heard of. And these are really where these blue-chip vehicles are shown on a golf course, and there are always auctions associated around the car show. And they're really celebrations of this really beautiful, old Ferraris, old Packards, and old Mercedes, and these really beautiful cars. And Haggerty, which is the insurance company and now sort of a lifestyle brand, owns Amelia Island now and runs it. And when they bought Amelia Island, they installed their own auction house into the on-site, as the on-site auction house. It's called Broad Arrow, effectively kicking out RM Sotheby's, which had occupied that on-site sort of, special spot at Amelia Island to hold their auction. And the person that owns RM Sotheby's is Rob Myers. And he really has a reputation as a very ferocious business person and very shrewd, smart guy. He held his auction offsite the next year. He spent $2.7 million holding one auction offsite at Amelia Island. And the next year after that, he thought, you know what? I'm going to compete and I'm going to do my own concours and I'm going to have my own auction down in Miami or Coral Gables. So this year, RM Sotheby's is holding their own concours and auction and at the Biltmore in Coral Gables. And the whole thing is set up as a competitor to Amelia Island. And, Amelia Island, it's about 45 minutes from Jacksonville. It's a very sleepy, beachy, quiet, very staid, traditional type feel concours. Now, Miami, this new concours that Rob Myers has come up with, we've got a Carbone pop-up with like $1,000 per seat dinners. We've got a Casa Tua connection. He's hired some pretty powerful players to help him set up this flashy, glitzy concours that will have, more supercars, more late model Ferraris and Lamborghinis. And it's feeling a lot younger and just in general, more Miami. So it will be really interesting to see the two.
It's interesting. Compete. So I don't know very many people who run in this world, but I know a few who do buy, $1 million cars or multi-million dollar cars. And for them, on the one hand, it's kind of about the auction house.
Sure.
Right? They know Rob. They know McKeel. And so they will decide based on that, probably, partially. Yes. On the other hand, it's kind of like how all of Wall Street moved to Palm Beach a few years ago. Even those who didn't really want to, all their friends and all their restaurants were going down there. So they just moved as a pack. And I wonder if the same thing will happen with the auction. Are the uber wealthy collector car crew, are they going to go to Miami with RM Sotheby's, or are they going to stay at Amelia Island with Hagerty? How do you see that turning out?
That's a really good question, and I guess we'll know the answer to that in a couple weeks' time. I have spoken with David Gooding, who also is going to have an auction at Amelia Island as well, and he says that they've had great consignments. It's taken a lot of work, but their quality of cars this year, of the people who choose to sell their car and to show the car on the auction field, have been better than ever, he says. So it's a really interesting question, and I don't know. At stake are the buyer and seller premiums at these auctions, really, because those tend to be 10 to 12%. And when you're selling a car that's 10 or 12 or $14 million, that ends up being quite a lot of money. So there's a lot of money to be made. And you're right. It's kind of about loyalty. Sometimes, people feel loyal to McKeel Hagerty, who's been around forever and is very well liked and respected. People might feel loyal to David Gooding. A lot of people feel loyal to Rob as well, and of course, within these auction houses, they'll make their own deals where maybe they'll waive a premium or they'll reduce the fee in order to get people to come to their side. So it will be really interesting. I'll actually be in Miami. I've gone to Amelia for many years. Love that show. And now I will go to Miami it's the new thing. Let's see how it goes.
And you wanted to eat at Carbone.
Yes, of course. I mean, I like spaghetti.
I saw your story, which I guess is going to go in Business Week.
Yeah, it'll be in Business Week on newsstands next week, and it's going live online this weekend.
Well, I was
Friday.
looking at the illustrations, and I don't know if you picked these or the editor did, but so Motor Miami has a 1976 Lamborghini Countach, the Periscope one,
yes.
A 1990 Ferrari F40, and a 1990 Mercedes-Benz 560 SEC AMG, the 6.0 liter
which
wide body.
I love. I think those cars are so cool.
I love them. But if I look at the Amelia Island, it's much more old school.
Yes.
Old money.
Yes.
1959 Porsche 718 RSK Spider. 1973 Ferrari 365 GTB for Daytona Spider, which is like the Miami Vice car.
Yes.
And 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Roadster. I'd rather have those cars, I got to say. Maybe that's a sign of my age. But
$2 to $3 million vehicles, let's not forget. I mean, these are these are the blue bloods.
Well, Amelia Island looks more like the Blue Blood and the classier choice.
I'm actually surprised to hear you say that, Matt. I thought you'd be really into the Mercedes and these more muscly.
I mean, obviously the Countach and the F40 are my era.
Yeah.
But to me, they just don't look, I would say they just aren't as beautiful as the Ferrari and the Porsche, the Mercedes. Those are going to be classic cars forever. Like the fact that a Countach is going to go for over $1 million now shocks me. And I know recently they've become much more collectible. Doug DeMuro has one. Matt Farah got one. But they got to be horrible to drive, and visibility, they had to put a periscope on it. And they always look like they always look like they're gonna fall apart. Even the F40 looks like a piece is gonna fall off of it all the time. And whereas the Mercedes, the 300 SL Roadster, it's gonna always look beautiful. The same is true of the Spider.
Yeah, and as a side note, anecdotally, I've done the Mille Miglia in a SL Gullwing, and we thrashed that thing hard for the duration of the 1,000+ miles every day, day in and day out, and it did not skip a beat. And that's really a tribute to the craftsmanship of that car. It's such an old car, and you can still really drive it really hard. I'm not sure we would have had the same luck driving a Countach over the same distance.
Well, the older ones, look like they were hand-beaten aluminum bodies. And the Countach, the F40, and the Mercedes, the 560 SEC, they look like somebody put a fiberglass drag kit on them, you know?
Not that that's a bad thing.
No, I feel like they're not going to age nearly as well.
I should say as a disclaimer, both Amelia Island and Moto Miami will have a wide variety of cars. So it's not like...
Of course.
I saw Moto Miami is going to have one of Fangio's Silver Arrow race cars, which is a major... Yeah, which is a huge, massive get. And I actually learned about it after the story had closed, so it's not in that piece, but they did consign that story. It's there. It's it's like one of the most significant F1 cars ever, if not the most. So that's huge, and that's an older one too. So
I mean, I'd rather have that car than any of the cars that we mentioned.
I had a feeling
by a long shot. And
I had a feeling.
When I talk about how I like that sort of stainless steel, unfinished, just clear coated metal look.
Yes,
that's what I love about the Silver
That
Arrows.
is done really well. Yes.
Plus, it's a single seater, open wheel. I mean, it is absolutely beautiful. That's all we have time for today, but it flew by.
Are you traveling somewhere
I
next week?
am going to Vail. And I need this is a great thing that people could email me. So I'm flying into Denver next Thursday.
Haunted airport, by the way.
Yes, I love that. What should I rent? Should I Turo something? Should I get something on Turo? Or is there a good place to rent a car in America? I've been living in Germany for so long that I'm a little bit spoiled because there you can rent everything at a Hertz or a Sixt. But here, it's not as easy, right?
I don't know. I'm not well versed, but I would throw my vote for Turo for sure. It was a very good experience, and you should just get something kind of wild that you'd never otherwise get.
Well, hopefully people could email me or email us. Hotpursuit@bloomberg.net is the address. I was thinking like a Super Duty pickup with a 6.7 liter diesel. I'm very much looking forward to it. So, and if anyone has any tips on how to get a sweet car in Denver, please shoot us an email. That does it for this week. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.